Hello everybody and welcome to my live baking session with Milkmaid. I'm super excited to be spending my Saturday afternoon baking with you guys, and I hope that you're also excited. And I think this time of the year is absolutely perfect to put on your baking hats and experiment in the kitchen. So I'm super thrilled about this. My name is Shivesh. I'm a self-taught baker and author, and I absolutely love baking, styling, photographing and eating my desserts. And whenever it comes to baking and experimenting in the kitchen, I am never without my most trusted companion, which is my Milkmaid can. And some of you would already know that I do this series called I Milkmaid It on my Instagram, where I experiment with Milkmaid and create a lot of different desserts. And as somebody who loves to bake, it's been such a pleasure to do this for almost a year now, because it makes you realize how versatile this one single ingredient is. I've used it to make fudge, to make cakes, puddings, custards, banoffee pies. So honestly, the possibilities are absolutely endless. And while there are limitless options, I have picked out a very special recipe for you today, which is very appropriate for the weather. And it's also one of my most favorite cakes to make. We are going to be making a carrot cake with cream cheese frosting. And it's an eggless recipe, and I think you're going to like it very, very much. Before I start with the recipe that I have to share today, I'd love to hear from you if you guys have used Milkmaid in your kitchen, and if there's a special recipe that you keep going back to, if it's something that you make in your kitchen very often. Let me know. I have my chat box here, so I can keep reading your comments. If you also have any questions related to the recipe that I'm doing here, feel free to enter all your questions and I'll keep answering them as and when possible. Great. So Divya is saying that she loves carrot cake. High five on that, because it's honestly one of my favorite cake flavors as well. Hi Sunny, thank you for tuning in. Great. So now that everybody is here, I think we can start with this extremely special recipe. I have my mixing bowl here, but the first step always is to preheat your oven. So my oven is already preheating at 180 degrees Celsius. And this step is extremely important, because if you put your cake into a cold oven, it will not rise properly and it will not bake evenly. So that is extremely important. I also have an 8-inch cake pan here that I have greased with melted butter and lined with parchment paper. This is extremely important, and I know how heartbreaking it could get when you put in so much time and effort into baking a cake and it doesn't come out of the pan. I feel like that's the most terrible thing that could possibly happen. So again, a very, very important step that you should never skip. Prepare your pan, grease it well and line it with parchment paper. All right, great. Tanvi is saying, I make chocolate fudge with Milkmaid. I do that too, and I feel like fudge is such a great dessert to make for Christmas, and you could always add in a lot of different toppings and dry fruits and marshmallows and all of that in it. So it's actually very festive and very appropriate for the time as well. Alright, so now to make the carrot cake, in my mixing bowl, I am first going to add half a cup of melted butter along with half a cup of milk. And what you have to really make sure is that whenever you're baking, all your ingredients should be warm or at room temperature. Whenever you use cool ingredients or ingredients straight out of your fridge while baking, they don't emulsify together or mix together really, really well. I'm just going to read your comments quickly as well. I love carrot cakes, perfect Christmas dessert. I absolutely agree. If possible, let me know the pressure cooker instructions for the same. Tanvi, that's actually a great question, and you can absolutely make this cake in a pressure cooker as well. What you need to do is that take your pressure cooker, put in some salt and a stand in it and preheat it for about 8 to 10 minutes. Make sure you take the whistle off and keep the lid on. And once the cooker is hot, you open it and put your cake in. Somebody said, I make tres leches using Milkmaid. That's also one of my all-time favorite recipes, which I absolutely love. And I hope that we can make it together sometime as well. Great. So my melted butter goes into the bowl. This is half a cup, which is about 113 grams of salted butter. For all my desserts, I like using salted butter because it kind of balances out the sweetness a little bit. In case you are using unsalted butter, you could always add in that extra pinch of salt. Into this, I am also adding in half a cup of milk. As I said, this is heated in the microwave for a few seconds just so that it doesn't set our melted butter. I'm going to mix this together. And now into this, I am going to add 1 can of Nestle Milkmaid. Let me crack this open. Now what Milkmaid does here is 2 things. Look at that. Perfect. So this does 2 things. Firstly, it helps me make this cake eggless. I think a lot of you would already know that Milkmaid works as a perfect substitute for eggs in almost all the desserts, especially cakes. So for me, this is my go-to ingredient every time I want to make that perfectly soft eggless cake. I make sure I have some Milkmaid going in because it really helps. And a lot of people I know have the perception that you can't make soft and fluffy cakes without eggs. But you will see that change today, and you will see how with Milkmaid we'll achieve that perfectly soft and fluffy cake. The other thing that this also does is that it makes your cake extremely and perfectly sweet. So you will see that I'll not be adding any more sugar, additional sugar or any kind of sweetener into my cake besides the Milkmaid can, because this really adds that perfect amount of sweetness into my cake. So this goes in. Look at that beautiful thick and creamy texture, and this is what is going to make our cake beautiful. And every time I honestly use Milkmaid, I'm always reminded of how this has been a part of my home for so many years now. I remember my nanny used to use this a lot, not just in Indian desserts but also every time she used to bake cakes. And I was actually introduced to baking from my nanny. And so Milkmaid practically has been a part of my home for almost, few decades now. And I, of course, have been using it for a lot of the Western desserts that I do. In fact, it's been a part of my baking journey since day one, and more so especially since I have started baking eggless cakes, because it's something that is so easily available. And when I started blogging and I started sharing my recipes, I realized that a lot of people who don't like putting eggs, can't choose eggs, or are allergic to eggs, want to make perfectly soft cakes eggless. And I thought that this makes for that perfect ingredient to substitute your eggs. So let's also mix this in. In fact, I'm sure that a lot of you guys have also seen Milkmaid being used at home while growing up. So if you have any special memories associated with Milkmaid or the desserts that maybe your mom used to make or your grandparents used to make, please share those special stories with me in the comments, and I'd love to take a look. In fact, I have to tell you this, and it's extremely special. My nanny has this handwritten recipe book that we found, not a recipe book but like a recipe diary, like a small notepad in which she would write down her recipes. And we found that recently, and we saw that a couple of recipes have Adha Dabba Milkmaid written in it, or like 1 Dabba Milkmaid written in it. I thought that was very, very special. And the fact that decades later I still use this in my kitchen almost every day just makes it so much more special to me. So somebody who's just logged in has asked, what are you baking? So we are making an eggless carrot cake, and with that we'll also make a cream cheese frosting, so stay tuned. When mom made gajar ka halwa, she made saved Milkmaid for us because we loved it. That's actually so special. And again, as I said, it's not just for Western desserts but also in Indian desserts that we traditionally make at home. This actually does so well. During Diwali, I made kalakand, and a very easy, simple way of making it with Milkmaid and homemade paneer, and it just helps you thicken the entire thing also very quickly. So I know for a fact that even for a lot of Indian recipes, this comes really handy. I do the same. The best part is licking the tin. I was actually not wanting to do that on camera, but I have some stuck around the edges. So once I log off from the live, you know exactly what I'm going to do, because here in this kitchen, we don't waste any Milkmaid. I usually make brownie and sitafal cream using Milkmaid. I think now reading all of this is making my mouth water because there's actually so many things that we could do. Ice creams, of course, like that is something that I personally do a lot. In the summer, every time I have to make ice cream at home, it is always done with Milkmaid. In fact, I remember for the first episode that I did for iMilkmaid series on my Instagram, we did this mango cheesecake ice cream with Milkmaid, and that turned out really well. So I'm actually waiting now for the summers to come so that I can experiment with a lot more ice cream flavors. Can we do a loaf version of this cake? Of course you can. This actually also, one more thing that reminds me is that every time I make an eggless cake with Milkmaid, one of the things that I always really appreciate is the fact that it has a very nice and a very proper structure. So you could do this in a bundt pan, you could do this in a loaf can. I'm using a round tin today, but of course you could experiment with any kind of shapes that you like. Alright, now coming back to my recipe, everything is nicely combined, and now into this I am going to be adding 2 cups of flour. So this is plain flour here, which is your maida. So I'm going to be adding this in. Now mostly for my eggless cakes, I also like to sift my dry ingredients just so that it aerates a little bit. So I have sifted the maida before using it. You could also do that here with the rest of the ingredients. That's completely up to you. Now into this I am also going to be adding 1 teaspoon of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So that goes in. Now personally for me, a carrot cake is absolutely incomplete without the spices, which give this cake a very nice and a warm fuzzy feeling. So I am also adding in 2 teaspoons of cinnamon powder and 1 teaspoon of ginger powder. This is completely optional. I also know that a lot of people don't like adding spices to the cake. So if you like, you can also skip this completely. Or if you're like me and you're on the team of like really adding nice spices to the cake, you could also go all out and maybe add in some freshly grated nutmeg or maybe some ground clove or star anise, and all of this like really makes the cake a nice fuzzy and a warm hug kind of a feeling. So all of this has gone in, and now I am going to use my spatula and fold this in. As I said, I am not adding any extra sugar. So a lot of carrot cake recipes would either have caster sugar or brown sugar going in. We don't have any of that here because our cake is going to be perfectly sweet with the Milkmaid that we've added in. Now again, a very important thing to keep in mind while you're making any cake for that matter is to not overmix while combining your dry and wet ingredients. And I think this is one mistake that I made while I was starting out, because it's just so much fun to keep mixing your batter, and it's very oddly satisfying and comforting to see a cake batter come together. So I would just take my electric mixer and just like put it on the highest possible speed and keep mixing. And I realized that what that really does is knock out all the air from our cake and make it extremely dense and heavy. So to avoid doing that, now I just ditch my electric mixer, I use my spatula and just gently fold the dry mix in until I don't see any large flour pockets in my batter. And while I do this, I am going to actually take a few comments also at this point. So Nandini is saying, I made your carrot cake today. It was really good. Everyone loved it. Thank you for teaching me baking. Thank you so much, Nandini. That's so sweet. And I am so glad you like this cake as much as I do. And this is also one of my family's favorites. So every time I'm hosting friends or family, or even if there's a Christmas party, this is like my go-to recipe that I make all the time. That gooey fudge with Milkmaid is delicious. I agree. So Nidhi Agarwal from Facebook is saying, hello Shivesh, join late, please tell what you're making. Guys, I'm making an eggless carrot cake today with cream cheese frosting, and we are making it eggless because I'm going to be using, I have actually already used 1 tin of Nestle Milkmaid in it. why to make anything, just have it just like that when you're craving dessert. That's also actually true, and I know a lot of people who do that. They just crack open a can of Milkmaid, and whenever they're craving something sweet, they just dig in with a spoon and eat that, which I also think is a great idea. A lot of people, including me, also love adding like a spoonful into my coffee to sweeten it, or maybe just drizzle it over some toast with some butter. So what I'm sharing today is actually quite elaborate, which I think is suited for the festive season that we're in. But otherwise, if you are not really keen on spending too much time in the kitchen, you could always do these little hacks with the Milkmaid can, which also makes for a very delicious sweet treat in your kitchen. So Megan is saying, love your recipes. Thank you so much. I'm a huge fan of your content. Thank you, Shreya. Thank you so much. Can you repeat the quantity of maida, please? Sadhya, I'm using 2 cups of maida in this recipe. Great. Can we make cream cheese at home? And if yes, how much is it different from the market one? So Nidhi, I actually make cream cheese at home a lot of times, because I know that in a lot of smaller cities and even in bigger cities, it is quite expensive and may not be very, very easily available. And it's actually extremely simple to make at home just by using some fresh cream, some milk, an acidic ingredient like vinegar or lemon. You could easily make it at home. In fact, I have done videos on this on my social media channel, so you can check it out. And personally, it works very well. If you want to make cheesecakes or if you want to make frostings, it will work perfectly fine. So you could definitely go and make cream cheese at home instead of buying it from outside. Alright, now my batter looks good. And now I think time to add in what we've all been waiting for, which is grated carrots. So I have 2 cups of carrots in my hands, as you can see. And the best time again to make a carrot cake is now, because you get the best quality carrots at this time of the year. What I've done here is that I've just used a regular grater to grate the carrot. What a lot of people end up doing is squeezing out the water from the carrots, which is something that I would not suggest doing, because you need that kind of moisture. If you see at this stage, our batter is not very, very thin. It's actually a very thick batter. So the moisture from the carrots is going to help us achieve that perfect consistency. So I'm going to add this in, 2 cups of grated carrots. And I also have some chopped walnuts here that I'm going to add in. Again, what I am sharing today is just a base recipe. You could experiment it with it the way that you like. You could add in some toasted pecan nuts, hazelnuts, almonds. If you like, you could also throw in some black raisins or chopped cranberries. All of that would make this cake even better. I am using walnuts because I personally love them and I know that they're very easily available. What I would recommend doing is toasting them a little bit in the oven or over the stove, just to add that nuttiness and that extra flavor into your cake. And now again, using my spatula, I am just going to fold everything in. I am still, by the way, waiting, guys, for everyone to share their memories of Milkmaid as a kid, or even if it's a recent memory of you experimenting and baking with it. I would love to listen to your stories as well. Megan is asking, what is the ideal way, both rods on in an OTG, which I usually do, or lower rod on? So what you're doing is absolutely correct. Even I keep both the rods on and the fan on whenever I'm baking anything. So that really helps. So Shambhavi is asked if we need to squeeze the water out of the carrots. No, you don't, because we need that moisture for our batter. Which has been your favorite dessert with Milkmaid? Okay, now that is an extremely challenging question, because as I said, over years, ever since I've started baking, I've made so many multiple things with Milkmaid. Even in the cakes, for example, I do an eggless chocolate cake with Milkmaid. I do a lemon cake, which is also my favorite during the summer. The carrot cake, as you guys can see. But if I have to pick 2 desserts, which I am craving right now as we speak, one definitely has to be a banoffee pie. For that, what I do is I actually cook Milkmaid in the can for a couple of hours until it becomes this really caramelized and beautiful dulce de leche, and I use that as a filling for my banoffee pie, which is again a very, very interesting way to actually use Milkmaid by cooking it and making it a very quick toffee. And the things again that you can do with it are just so many options. And the other thing that I also really love doing with my Milkmaid is making a cheesecake, because again eggless cheesecakes are extremely tricky and a lot of people don't get it right, but I have over the years made cheesecakes in multiple sizes, shapes, forms and flavors with my Milkmaid, and I have personally been never disappointed. It's always great. Alright, so now my cake batter is ready. I am going to transfer it into my greased pan, and then this goes into the oven. This will take about 45 to 50 minutes, maybe 55 depending on your oven. So always make sure you keep an eye, and once you actually insert a skewer in the middle of the cake, and if it comes out clean, you will know that it is cooked completely and you can take it out. So all of it goes in. I am just going to spread it out a little bit and then send it off to baking. And I always say that baking is all about magic happening in the kitchen. So with another magic, I already have a cake which is baked and ready. And as you guys can see, it has turned out absolutely beautiful. It's got a nice golden brown crust on top. The color on the edges is stunning, and it's nice and warm right now. And again, as you can see, super simple to put together, and actually the making part of it is much shorter than the baking time. I'm going to be decorating with a cream cheese frosting that I'm going to quickly show you how to make. So in my bowl, I'm going to add half a cup of 50 grams of butter. Again, I'm using salted butter even for my frosting, along with cream cheese. And since this is a small batch, I'm just going to use my spatula to make it. Otherwise, for your frostings, you could also use an electric mixer like this. And I'm just going to mix this together. Again, both my ingredients are nice and soft. They are at room temperature, not straight out of the fridge or cold. How much space should we leave in the tin? So I almost like to fill almost 2/3. I don't like to go above that, because a lot of time the cake batter pours out of the pan, and then that kind of creates a mess which is very difficult to clean. Nidhi is saying that I am a home baker and I use your recipe of chocolate pudding. I keep getting orders of that. Thank you, Nidhi. I am so glad you like that recipe. And now into this, I am going to be adding the icing sugar, which is again sifted. So 1.5 cups of icing sugar. I'm going to add this in batches. To make sure that my icing sugar doesn't fly around everywhere, I'm just going to give it one initial mix and then maybe actually switch to my electric mixer. Okay, now with my electric mixer, I'm just going to beat everything together. Oops. And this helps me incorporate a lot of air into my frosting and make it super light and fluffy. In the middle, don't forget to scrape the edges to make sure that all of that icing sugar is nicely incorporated. And of course, if you are making a double layer cake or a triple layer cake, you could always multiply the ingredients and make a bigger batch of frosting. This needs to go in the fridge for just a bit so that all the butter and the cream cheese that we've put in kind of sets a little bit. But I have a batch which is already chilled, and I'm going to add dollops of that onto my carrot cake. Again, you could also, if you don't want to frost this cake at all, this also is great as it is. As I said, it's perfectly sweet, so you can also serve it as a tea cake without frosting, or you could do a white chocolate ganache on top, or maybe just do a simple buttercream. But personally for me, I absolutely love the combination of cream cheese frosting with the carrot cake. So I'm just going to spread it out. I know a lot of people think that I love decorating and frosting cakes, but that's actually not true, because this is when I'm most impatient to actually cut into the cake. So I usually like to do a quick job with it, something that also looks extremely pretty, but something that is not very time consuming. And this is my favorite way of just simply slathering the frosting on top of the cake. If you like, you could also do it on the edges. And to decorate it, I am going to use some chopped walnuts and cranberries. So these are just simple dried cranberries which have been chopped along with some chopped walnuts. And I am going to sprinkle them around the edges. I'll just see if there's been any more questions or comments. What size cake tin are you using? So I'm using an 8-inch cake pan. If we don't ice the cake, should we add some sugar to the cake? Not really, honestly, you don't need to. As I said, you can serve this without the frosting as a simple tea cake, and it's just perfectly balanced, so you will not feel the need to add any extra sugar to it. So Shreya has shared a story with us. She's saying that my mother used to make besan barfi with Milkmaid, and that I think is so great. I haven't tried making a besan barfi with Milkmaid yet, but that's a great idea, and maybe I'll make it for my next episode of the I Milkmaid It series. And I hope that you guys are watching the episodes that I'm sharing on Instagram and keeping a track of all the recipes. I've done about 9 episodes so far. And besides that, of course, you could always visit milkmaid.in for 100 plus recipes. So the options actually, as I said, are endless, and there's so much that you can do just with a can of Milkmaid. And there you go, our carrot cake is ready. And as I always say in my true style, I Milkmaid it and I loved it. The carrot cake is ready. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask me, and I'm happy to answer them for you. So Jules has said, hi Shivesh, I made a batch of milk toffees with Milkmaid yesterday. One second. And I also made your recipe of eggless Christmas cake. Turns out to be awesome, super tasty and very Christmassy. Thank you so much, Jules. I'm so happy that you liked this recipe. And I hope that you guys are also planning to make this carrot cake in your kitchen. And if you do, don't forget to take a picture of it and share it on your social media accounts and tag me at Shivesh17 and Milkmaid. And also use the hashtag IMilkmaidIt so that we can all see all the amazing creations that you guys do with Milkmaid and join the conversation with you. Delicious, thank you. Where can we find this recipe? So what I'm going to do is, as soon as I log out of the live, I'll share a screenshot of the recipe with all the measurements on my Instagram story, so you guys can take a screenshot and save it for later. And please do try this recipe out. I hope you guys enjoy it. Your friends and family enjoy it as much as I did. And when you make it, don't forget to say this with me, that I Milkmaid it and I loved it.